I mean, there's always the argument. I'd say it's a pretty fair argument that the Championship's probably the most competitive league in England. You always have those clubs sort of pushing up from the lower leagues, maybe just like Wickham, for example, just ducking up from League One for the first time. Like, got the yo-yo clubs like Norwich and West Brom and a few others like that always knocking about. But the form Swansea have been in, especially that middle patch, I think that was probably about the time Jamal Lowe started scoring, because I think he'd got
Yeah.
one in about 10 or 12. Was that before the South Wales derby? And I think he netted two, and then he just started banging them in week after that and that and that. And then there was the Ben. I mean, love Ben Foster, really nice guy, but that was absolutely hilarious. The thing with the GoPro, giving it, got to love a bit of shit housery.
That
But
sums up modern football, doesn't it?
oh, it does. You sort of ask him for it if you put a little camera in the back of your goal. Like, come on, mate, what are you doing? But it's interesting what you said about taking time to sort of recover from the relegation and sort of get back half to the style of football you were playing that got you up to the Premier League in the first place. I think Cardiff have especially struggled. I don't know. I've obviously been in North Wales. I don't know loads about Cardiff, but from what I've seen, they got promoted with a Championship team. Didn't really build on that. Really struggled. Took a lot of knocks. Came back down, and they've still got the same sort of deadwood players that weren't maybe entirely responsible for the relegation. You know, you can't shoulder the blame onto a few groups of players. As team, it's collective responsibility. Same with the managers, directors, and people who are bringing the players in and out. But I think it might. I don't know, because they seem to be doing quite well under Mick McCarthy. But I thought it might
They've
take them a
certainly they've
while
certainly
to.
had the new manager bounce, haven't they?
I think it might somewhat be that.
Whenever you change the manager, you hope for that little upturn in form and results, don't you? And some teams get it, some teams don't, and Cardiff certainly have under McCarthy, and I think they won the last 6, have they? Won 5 or 6 on the bounce, I think.
I think so. I think the first one was a draw, and then they've won the next 5, maybe. I know Kiefer Moore's scored in the last 4 or something like the last 5 as well, and well, they've shot up to 7th now. I think they were knocking around 15th, 16th. They'd been really struggling when they got rid of Neil Harris. But yeah, they were a team I thought would really struggle to get back to what they were. Like you said, the new manager bounce. That's probably why managers are so expendable nowadays in football, because it is just all results driven. And if you can have a 10-game run, like sort of mid-season after sacking someone that's just going to keep you up, you're probably going to do it, aren't you? Because you're going to want that extra money that you don't really want the parachute payment. You want that extra money in the TV rights that comes stay with the Premier League. But
exactly. And once you get up to the Premier League, there's obviously 2 trains of thought in there. You can do a Norwich when 2 years ago, obviously they went up.
Yeah.
They didn't spend hundreds of millions to have a full throw at it. They played within, they operated within their resources and their budget. And they're obviously not happy, but, they went down, took the money, and, they were able to keep some of the Premier League players in the Championship, and look where they are now. They're like 5 or 6 points clear of second place, aren't they? So it looks like they're going to go back up. It's probably more of a slightly long-term strategy, slightly long-term style of thinking. Whereas you look at clubs, mentioned Cardiff, Fulham, they go up and throw 100 million quid away in trying to sign players to keep them up, and it doesn't work. And that's why clubs of that ilk, they'll more than likely always be a yo-yo, because they'll go up, get the money, spend the money, go down, recover. Probably even the squad players in the Premier League now can compete in the Championship, obviously. So they'll be there or thereabouts come the end of the season to go back up. I think they got back up through the playoffs last year, did they?
Oh, Fulham, sorry.
I think they beat Brent. I think they
beat Brentford
in the playoff final, didn't they?
Oh, it was that really wacky goal from Joe Bryan, I think.
So, there's 2 trains of thought in there, and I think Fulham have been a bit more prudent this year in their approach. They haven't gone and spent hundreds, and part of that's obviously the climate that football's in at the moment. They probably couldn't go and spend a couple of 100 million quid even if they wanted to. Especially with Brexit now. You can't, it's make it that harder to shop abroad, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's about what business model they have in place, and I read something today about a lot of teams now. This is getting off topic slightly, so a lot of teams now are going to the US for loans to cover the shortfall in income that they've had in the pandemic drop, and they're high interest loans, but it's the price they got to pay to cover their operating costs, and if they go find a US backer that's going to give them 100 million quid at a 10% interest rate, you're gambling a lot on staying in the league,
Definitely. It's I think as well when well, not necessarily just Americans, you have it the same in the UK, people like Mike Ashley who clearly have no interest in football, but they'll buy a football club just to sort of milk it for every penny, sell the naming rights to St James's Park, even though who actually calls it Sports Direct Arena? It's like calling the Millennium the Principality. Like, it just doesn't happen amongst me or any of my friends. So yeah, what was it? Oh yeah, I don't personally like the idea of these vested interests that don't really have an interest in football because it sort of liquidates and dilutes the game a bit. But look at uh look at what Robin Ryan doing at Wrexham at the minute, sort of taking over there, plunging a lot of money into the community as well. I have to say, which is really good. A lot of owners, they might do the odd fundraiser or like set up a little community event there, but they don't really sort of try and give back to the town. So it's nice to see that from sort of big name rich owners as well for a smaller stature club. But I think it's interesting what you said about sort of the American players coming over because I've always thought there's supposedly these really top talents coming out of the US. You always hear about them going into World Cups and that. With sort of the short window from January to the end of the season, I think that's their off season, isn't it? Because of how the MLS starts. You could
Yeah.
bring in a few loan players just for 6 months, trial them, get a bit of game time in their legs, and if they can, you might have another Pulisic on your hands, or I was gonna say like Almiron's come from the MLS, but he's been well. I'd say lukewarm's a bit of a compliment.
So
Can't
up
really
and
think
down
of
at
anyone else
Newcastle, and
to be.
it's hard. It is hard for them because let's be honest, the Premier League is a considerable step up from MLS, isn't it? It's always been the way that people tend to go to America after Europe to finish off their careers, isn't it? Um, I know the infrastructure they got in the country in America. They've spent vast billions to get colleges and universities and the sort of semi-pro leagues up to a level where they can train players up to get competitive in the MLS. And I'm surprised. I'm with you. I'm surprised it's not been a more sort of looked at market to get players. You look at in the start of the Premier League, it was Europe. French players, Italian players, Spanish players were coming over in their droves. And then it went to South America, and you had Janino and things like that, and then it went to Africa, and you had all Ivory Coast players, Senegal players. After a country does well in a World Cup, they tend to go and look at that continent, don't they? And I think America it's probably at that level now where you can start looking at it as terms of a sort of a genuine market to go shopping for players. The national team. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they're going to win a World Cup anytime soon, but they're competitive and they're hard. Wales had a friendly against them back end of last year.
Yes. Yeah,
Or
it was
October time
October,
last year, I think it
November,
was.
sometime. Yeah,
And it was a hell of a hard game. USA were probably the better team for most of the game.
hard to break down. And got a lot of young players coming through as well, haven't they? Like, there's a couple of lads over in Germany, a few lads
Yeah.
in Premier League like Pulisic, but they've always had the odd American player here and there. Mainly goalkeepers, wasn't it? Like Tim Howard for had three though. Clint Dempsey's the only other one I can think of.
Yeah. Fulham had Brian McBride for a while, didn't they? He was a bit of a stalwart in their
The
side.
centre forward was he?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, big fellow, wasn't he? But it's out of a population of a couple of billion people. They should be able to create a few decent footballers at the end of the year. Everyone knows it's not the sport of choice in America at the moment. It's far more lucrative sports to play in America. But I think football over there will have its time, definitely, and I think it's going to be a market that's going to be on the up from now on, really. I think the Swans links with America help, obviously. It didn't help in the Premier League when we tried Bob Bradley. Less said about that, the better. But the owners or whoever the investors are that are coming into the club, they've obviously got a bit of an insight as to what it's like over there. Yeah. That's not to say Andy Scott isn't looking at America anyway. He looks, so apparently he's got a scouting network now all over the globe. There's an interview with him in the paper, I think it was today or earlier yesterday or today. That when he came into the club after Graham Potter left to Brighton, and he took all of his staff with him, Cooper came in and obviously appointed Andy Scott. And Andy Scott came in and he was like, right, so where's the scouting setup? What are we doing? And Cooper was like, nothing. There's nothing
On,
here.
mate.
You haven't even got an office, to be honest with you, mate. So there was no scouting network. There was no scouts. Yeah. There was no head of there was no head of recruitment. There was nothing. So he's had to build it from the ground up. And Jordan, unfortunately, Jordan Morris now has been confirmed today. He's out for the season. He did his ACL in against Huddersfield in a bad injury. But we've got Paul. We signed Paul Areola from DC United as well on the last day of the transfer window, and he's, from what I've seen of him briefly and what I've read about him, he's versatile. He can play across the middle. He can, people are talking about him playing wide up front or whatever. So. Like I say, it's going to be a market where they find players for probably years to come, I'd imagine.
Definitely. I don't think it's just America they're hosting one of the future World Cups in, but I think they're doing it between the US, Canada, and Mexico.
That's right.
I think, is that after Qatar? So that'd be 2026, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Something like that. So with that coming up, it does always seem like when South Africa had the World Cup, that was the first one in Africa, wasn't it? So you always do seem to have, well, you saw it with Japan in the Rugby World Cup. You always have a spike in interest in the sport when you host a big tournament like that. So with that being in America in 5 years now, you'd like to think they're going to try and put a bit more emphasis on football. I know they're not hosting the full thing, but football's a massive part of Mexican culture. You see all the pictures in the stadiums, and that's just like anywhere in Central or South America, really. Canada are always a bit of a weird one, because I don't know if they're a bit like us, but they don't have sort of the core squad players. They always seem to have one or two really good individuals, and then maybe a load of sort of lower half MLS players and a few Canadian league players here and there. But that'd be an interesting look. I'd be much more inclined to go to that one than Qatar. I have to say, I have absolutely zero intention of visiting.
I think
I'm probably not rich enough to afford to be able to go, to be honest, but.
No, I don't fancy going to the desert in 40-degree heat to watch a game of football, to be honest.
Over Christmas as well, because it's going to be a winter one, isn't it?
Oh, God, I forgot about that as well. I forgot about that.
That's weird. I don't like the idea.
The football purist in me just doesn't agree with that on any level, No. The World Cup is a summer tournament every 4 years. It's about sitting in a beer garden with a few pints, watching a game, or even a fan zone, when Wales were in the Euros is probably one of the best times of our lives, But it's just everything that was wrong about FIFA at the time to award Qatar the World Cup. I don't think anyone's expecting them to host a knockout, an unbelievable tournament, knock it out of the park, and we'll be back there in 4 years. It's just not. It's not just a country. It's not an area of the world where football is popular or commercial or big business, really.
Wouldn't say they've tried to make it in I think they've tried to plug a lot of money into Saudi Arabian football recently. They had did Raul go over there to play his last season?
Maybe. I think Xavi's a manager over there at the moment. Is that Saudi? Is he in Saudi or Qatar?
One of those two. I want to say Iniesta's over at one of them as well, but he might be in China or something like that. I know they've managed to attract like a few of the sort of bigger name retirees, just like, mate, do you want like 200k a week to sort of play a pub team down the road, and it'll get you a nice flat.
But again, it's what MLS was in the 80s, wasn't it? You know, when
Yeah,
70s and 80s, when Beckenbauer and Pele and George Best would go over there to retire, and you know,
sort of like an exhibition league.
couple of years in the sun before they retire, you know. But you know, to give them a World Cup, I think was pretty staggering, to be honest. I think there's, you know, you could reel off a list of 20 countries that have got better infrastructure, got the stadiums ready, and deserve a World Cup, to be honest.
Yeah.